All right, guys, what's going on? So I'm going to do this. This is for everybody, including those who are making their corrections either tomorrow or taking the test tomorrow or doing their corrections on Friday and finishing their tests. Um, First and foremost, I really do need you to study the do now questions. For the most part, many of those answers are the same. Um, and many of the questions are the same. So, like, keep in mind, right? Like, those of you that took it, there's that image on the very first page. There's the image of the ice. And what do we know about solids? What do we know about the makeup of solids? We know that the makeup of solids is that they are closer together, right? They're closer together, so therefore their density is less. So therefore, the ice will float. Um, the molecules in ice cannot be further apart than the molecules in water because when there's a solid, they're bouncing off of each other. They're close. Um, Water, they have space to spread out. Okay. So those are some of the things that you need to keep in mind. That when we have solids, the molecules of solids are closer together than the molecules are in a liquid or in water. And then in steam, they're even further apart. So really, if you had to rank them, the molecules in a solid are the closest together. Again, keep in mind saturated and unsaturated fats. Okay. The unsaturated fats are spread out a little bit because they're a liquid, because they have double bonds that take place. Okay. In water and in ice, it's all single bonds. So it's all those things that you need to keep in mind that when it's a solid, okay, when it's a solid, it's more condensed down. When it's liquid or water, they're spread out more. So just keep that in mind when you're answering those questions. All right. You need to just be smart, reread the questions, reread the answers, and make sure. I did not grade anything. I did I have my own screen, my own sheet that I did where I know what questions you got right and I know what questions you got wrong. I'm not going to do anything, but I want you to think about it. And for some of you, you had the right answer and then you changed it. That's all I'm going to say. All right. So just keep that in mind. All right. As you look through things. Um, no. When we have high specific heat capacity, what is it about that? When you look at the question, it talks about the different bonds. Well, water only has one type of bond. And what is it? So just keep that in mind. You know, what type of bond does it have to be? Okay. And then the unique properties of water. Keep that in mind. Why are hydrogen and van der Waals interactions necessary for cells? Keep in mind the genetic material for that type of question. What buffers do? Buffers, remember, if we didn't have buffers, our pH levels would go up and down all over the place, which means if they were swinging wildly, it would be crazy. So they have to take out both hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions. All right. So just make sure you're reading the questions and reading the answers. A lot of these questions are set up specifically how they're going to be set up on the AP test. Okay. Where they're going to have two choices that are similar, two other choices that are similar, but they're wrong. The two choices that are similar, you just need to make sure you read them and make sure you ferret out what you need to have for that. So just keep that in mind. And remember the structure of saturated and unsaturated fats. Saturated fats are straight lined. They're all single bonds, which means what? When everything's a single bond, what can it do? It can pack together. So what does that usually mean at room temperature? Okay, keep that in mind. And unsaturated fats will have a double bond somewhere in that carbon backbone. And that does not allow them to pack as tightly. And that's why they stay as a liquid. at room temperature. Okay, so just there's things you need to make sure that you read. Make sure you know what the functional groups are. Make sure you know whether or not they're polar or acidic or basic. There's actually only one that is basic in nature, and that is the amino. The amino group, even though I know you hear amino acid, and that's why a lot of you probably maybe chose acid. I didn't really look at that question, but just keep that in mind that the aminos are actually basic. Okay. Um, I'm trying to think of what else. Um, it's really keep in mind the naming. The ane, ene, eine, ane is single bonds, ene is double bonds, yne is triple bonds, and if it's across the carbon, um, backbone, then it's trans. But if it's on the same sides, it's going to be cis. Um, Almost all of your functional groups are going to be polar. And keep that in mind because you have usually either a hydroxide or a hydrogen ion in them. And because you have an ion in it, it immediately makes the entire group polar. There's a charge. And remember, electronegativity. We talked about this in the very beginning of the year. Electronegativity is the ability for an atom to pull an electron away from another atom. So remember what we talked about. The bigger the atom, the more electronegativity it has. So in that term, would oxygen pull from hydrogen or hydrogen pull from oxygen? And if it's pulling the electron, how does that oxygen become charged? So again, think it through. I need you guys to think it through, right? Knowing why certain groups are hydrophilic, and keep in mind the only macromolecules that we've even talked about briefly are the lipids, triglycerides, and those things, the fats. They're the only things we've talked about. So if any question asks you what a group is in and it says amino acids and fatty acids, it can't be, okay? Because we haven't really talked about the amino acids yet. So just keep all of that in mind, all right? And then just make sure in the modified essay, it's the choice of the two questions that are on the review sheet here at the bottom. Is there a relationship between a biological molecule structure and function? What is it and why would it be important? And explain the differences between saturated and unsaturated fats. What are the differences? And this is where I would say to you, use the test to take the test. You would be able to come up with almost enough evidence to be able to write your evidentiary paragraph for the second paragraph. All right. So just keep that in mind. Use the test to take the test. You'll be able to do that tomorrow. You guys will have the extra time that you need. And Ava, if you need time on Friday, you will absolutely get time on Friday if you don't have enough time tomorrow to get it done. Any other questions? See me later. Peace. Well.